Hello and welcome to the Land and Climate podcast. My name is Bertie Harrison-Broninsky, and today I'm talking to Dr Sonam Tashi, an organic agriculture expert at the Royal University of Bhutan. Most countries don't have national commitments around organic farming, and in Europe, where there have been some, momentum on the issue seems to be crumbling. Only last month, France scrapped its target to make 15% of farmland organic, and there's a growing scepticism about the EU as a whole being able to meet its goal of 25% by 2030. A few thousand miles east, though, the relatively small country of Bhutan is a global outlier, with a national commitment to certifying 100% of its farmland as organic by 2035. Dr Tashi was Bhutan's Deputy Chief of Horticulture when the policy began to develop in the noughties, and has since become a leading academic voice on the country's successes and failures in working towards the goal. So I was interested to talk to him about how it's going.
Organic agriculture align very well with our development philosophy of cross-national happiness, so which emphasizes on not just economic development, but also well-rounded sustainability.
I began by asking Sonam to give us an overview of farming in Bhutan.
Bhutan is largely an agrarian country, so large majority of our people, more than 50% of our people depend on farming for their livelihood, and the contribution of agriculture to GDP used to be very high. Back in the 80s, used to be more than 30%. Now, gradually over the years, it has decreased, and the latest figure is the contribution from agriculture to GDP is just about 14%. And farming is largely smallholder farmers having average per capita land holding of less than 1 hectare. They grow all kinds of crops, actually, because we have a wide agroecological zones from subtropical, tropical to about humid subtropical. Then we have warm temperate and then cool temperate. So given that farmers grow almost everything from subtropical coconut and pineapple and mango and lychee to temperate apples and kiwis and so on. And in terms of cereals, we also grow rice, which is the mainstay crop of the country, but we also grow a little bit of buckwheat, barley, wheat, maize, corn, potatoes, all types of fruits, and all types of vegetables.
We've covered sustainable agriculture and organic farming a little bit on this podcast before. We've talked about the issues with big industrial farming in the USA, and newer models that are coming along there. Some of the setbacks the EU has faced trying to do organic farming or reduce pesticides and agrochemicals in recent years at a policy level. We've talked about Sri Lanka before as well, and the issues that they had with trying to implement organic farming in 2021 and 22. But I think Bhutan offers quite a different case study, really. Could you introduce to us the country's journey with organic agriculture a little bit?
Yes, actually, organic agriculture informally started back in 2002-03. That was very informal with the setup of National Organic Program. But back in 2008, it started to gain momentum, and that's why National Framework for Organic Agriculture of Bhutan was drafted. And then in 2012, the government thought we really need to go fully organic because the 4 principles of organic agriculture align very well with our development philosophy of cross-national happiness, so which emphasizes on not just economic development, but also well-rounded sustainability. Then in 2018, during the 12th 5-year plan, the government allocated 1 billion newton. By our standard, that is huge because other sectors do not get such kind of huge amount to do anything. So that was for 5 years, from 2018 July till last year, 2022 June, I think, for 5 years. But unfortunately, the COVID came along, and because of that, government slashed the budget by 50%, but still 500 million newton by our standard is still quite large. That was basically to build capacity. Now, in fact, all the farmers in the country to a large extent are trained in organic agriculture. Not just the farmers, even the extension agents who are working directly at the grassroots with the farmers, they have also been trained in various aspects of organic agriculture. But one thing that government has been emphasizing is that The government will not force the farmers to go organic, but if they are interested, the government would provide all sorts of support in terms of training, free distribution of inputs, and so on. So although it has been top-down, but again, in action, it's not really top-down. It's just looking at the interested farmers and at the same time also creating awareness that organic is better and sustainable than the conventional farming. And so that's how the approach is being adopted by the government to go fully organic. But we have not made much progress. I think it's less than 10% which has been fully converted to organic with certification and so on. Although they are not fully organic, they are to a large extent organic by default because they follow to a large extent all these principles of organic agriculture.
The statistics that I've seen recently are from 2019, so they might be a bit out of date now, but I think they said 37% of farmers were using agrochemicals and about 81% of farmland was presumed to be organic. Does that sound about consistent with where things are now, or do you think it's changed much since then?
Yes, although we use chemicals, synthetic chemicals, but then the use of the synthetic chemicals are very limited, very small amount, not in terms of quantities, but also in terms of types. So it's mainly the NPK, urea, SSP, single superphosphate, and MOP, muriate of potassium mainly. But then more and more now farmers are using this single complex fertilizer called Sufala, which has 15 nitrogen, 15% phosphorus, and 15% potassium. So if they use that one fertilizer, it has all these three components. But farmers still, some continue to use urea, and potassium and phosphorus is not so much applied. So it's urea mainly in potatoes as well as paddy, which are the most dominant crops in the country.
Yeah, when I've spoken to experts and farmers in Sri Lanka, fertilizer does seem to be the thing that comes up the most out of the major categories of agrochemical. That is the most tricky one to kind of switch away from. You mentioned gross national happiness. Am I right in saying Bhutan tries to measure its development primarily with that, or at least did when it set these goals, rather than GDP, focusing on economic growth? And when you and I spoke before, we talked about how there is less industrialization and major commercialization of agriculture in the country compared with, say, Western Europe or the USA. To what extent do you think that the government focusing on happiness rather than profit growth and financial growth has allowed this to become such a major policy and a priority of the government?
Yes, the government is very serious on gross national happiness, and that's why we had a Gross National Happiness Commission. But unfortunately, just in the last few months, the commission got dissolved because a lot of work were being duplicated, and that's been dissolved, but that has been transferred, dissolved as it is, as a commission, but it has been transferred to other ministries which were doing similar work. Government, of course, recognizes that economy is very important for a small country like ours, which is situated between two giant countries of India and China. And economy is important. If you are not economically strong, of course, we have a lot of risks to sovereignty. Given that government is trying to build economy, but then in a sustainable manner. So we are not cutting down all trees. Otherwise, we have huge trees and minerals and so on. These are not deliberately exploited to be rich overnight and then have this super economic growth. So government is very slow with a lot of emphasis given on happiness, but then also sustainable economic growth. So we have all these green projects and so on, initiated by the government and then supported by a lot of European Union countries, as well as our other partners such as Thailand, India, Japan, and so on.
And the target for becoming close to, if not fully 100% organic as a country was originally 2020, right? But it's now been pushed back to 2035. Could you tell us a little bit about why that happened? And do you think the 2035 target is realistic now?
The goal was set in 2012, but because the way that we were approaching or moving, like I said, there was no forcing the farmers to take fully organic. Some of the officials in the Ministry of Agriculture felt that going fully organic may compromise on the food security and food self-sufficiency goals of the country, particularly in terms of paddy production, potato production, and so on. These are the major crops, and didn't really force the farmers and continued using synthetic agrochemicals. But these confined to only few pockets in areas which are accessible to road networks and where farmers can actually afford these synthetic agrochemicals. And if you continue like how we are continuing, I think it may be difficult to be fully organic by 2035 if we don't change our strategy and then the approach, the way that we are doing. So we need to have this fundamental change in the way that we are conducting in terms of looking at the farm design, in learning at the best practices from other countries. We need to go for that, yeah.
When you say that there has been a slight uptick or increase in the amount of agrochemicals used in the country despite these plans, are you seeing certain trends around who is using that and where? Is it larger farmers or even bigger companies as opposed to smallholders? Or is it more widespread?
Yeah, we don't have big companies in agriculture. The average per capita land holding is less than 1 hectare. So it's about 1.34 acres. And so big companies are not operating in the agriculture sector, although government is now thinking of introducing this big commercial kind of farming that's there in the government's plan. But then to do it sustainably, so it's not just fully using all the synthetic agrochemicals and then using all these GMOs. The parliament has banned the use of GMOs in the country, so we don't have that. But from the perspective of use of synthetic agrochemicals, yes, these are farmers who are fairly well off and who are located in this nearby capital like Thimphu, Paro, Punakha, Wongdi, and these are districts which are close by the capital city and which have good motorable road, where accessibility is not an issue, where the customers are not an issue, and where the farmers are fairly well off.
What are some of the other challenges that have come up with the government's attempt to nudge farmers towards organic farming?
We have many challenges actually in the farms because we have smallholder farmers, and accessibility is one issue because although there is production on the farms, to carry this produce to the towns or to the consumers, it is quite challenging. Transportation in the rural areas are not very good, not systematic, and they are expensive. That's one, accessibility. Second is water shortage. Although we pride or we say that we have the highest per capita fresh water availability in our region in South Asia, almost 100,000 cubic meter. But then it is not available for farming because we don't have big reservoirs to get this water from the source to the reservoir and then to distribute this to the farms. So we have to depend on the annual monsoon rain for cultivation. That's the second. Third biggest challenge is the human wildlife. So we have human wildlife conflict in all the 20 districts in the country, but these are different species. South, the major is elephant, and of course wild boar is all over the country. Then we have monkeys all over. Then we have deer, different types of deer, and then the porcupines and so on. So given that the farmers say that they would rather not farm and buy and eat than do farming because they can't really get rid of the wild animals. So that's the fourth challenge. Fifth challenge we have is the cheap Indian produce. So the farm produce that come from India are cheaper than our own local produce. The price of local produce is high because the labor is not there and the labor charges are very high in the country. And so because of that, the production cost is high and naturally the price of the local produces are quite high. And sixth is, as a small country, we have a small market. And from this small market, the people who don't have this better purchasing power, again, cannot afford the high-priced local produce, and so they actually go for the cheaper imported produce. So these are the six actually major challenges that we have in the country that our marginalized farmers face in the country. So the challenges are common to both the organic and conventional farmers.
But do you think that some of these might be compounded by the transition to organic farming? I'm imagining that organic farming, it might be a bit more geared towards export markets so that you can get that premium price for the organic produce. Is that right? And maybe that means that issues around travel and distribution are larger as well.
Yeah, I think there are a few things to consider here. For the export, we don't have train or ship and so on. So we have our own national carriers, which are very small ones with a capacity of 200 passengers and so on. Because of our geographical terrain, we can't build big airports for flights. And so exporting is also quite expensive. And concerning vegetables or the farm produce, they are mostly perishable. So if you don't ship that immediately, then the quality deteriorates. Still, in few produces, we do export, like broccoli used to be exported to Singapore. We export quite a bit of mushrooms to Japan, essential oils to Germany, red rice to US and so on. So we do export, but then it's quite expensive and the logistic is not very easy given the transportation systems that we have in the place. Then again, it has to be sold in the local market. And in the local market, because of the high price, people, middle and lower middle income people would rather prefer the cheaper Indian produce than the local produce, because local produce, even if they are not organic, they are expensive. It's not organic. The use of synthetic chemicals are less, yet the price is high.
It kind of goes back to what you were saying about Bhutan measuring development and being motivated with policy through gross national happiness rather than GDP. Organic farming in other South Asian countries has been about this idea that you can get more money for organic produce at export market if you can sort out certification. But it sounds like that's not really a driver of the transition. What do you think are the primary drivers for trying to make the switch to organic farming? Is it sustainable development goals? And how do you think that happiness is linked to organic farming? What's the justification for that?
Export, of course, is also an element in terms of promoting organic because we want to build our brand. But then, like I said, the realities on the ground are quite difficult because of the logistic, transportation, and all that thing. But we are trying to encourage farmers that if you can export that, we get really high premium. But then that's a bit difficult. But the main reason for going fully organic is because it's sustainable, because agriculture is the primary backbone of the country. And then if you give up on agriculture, or if you do agriculture in a wrong way, then we'll have no food production in the country, or it will be expensive. And at the same time, it would compromise the integrity of the environment, the ecosystem, which is not in line with the gross national happiness philosophies. And so government feels that although we cannot go fully organic right away, even if you are commercializing farming, it has to be in a sustainable manner.
We've mentioned certification a little bit, but haven't really talked about the context in Bhutan. Could you tell us how that's going? I know this, again, is often an issue for various countries, with small farmers being able to meet the right checks and do the right administrative stuff to get certified with, especially internationally recognized ones, but even domestic ones.
Yeah, we have local organic certification. If farmers want to be certified, they have to talk to the extension people who work with the farmers at the grassroots, and then they register there, and then they have to be trained. Government provides the training, and people who are interested must get a minimum training of 3 days. Either that's organized in the local community or in another district. So that's all fully supported and funded by the government. And we also have a third-party certifier called BFDA, Bhutan Food and Drug Authority. So that's more like a government-accredited third-party certifier. But for the export, sometimes we actually bring in the certifiers from outside the country, from EU or from India or other countries. Like Japan, if they want to import food from our country, they can have their own local third-party certifiers who come to Bhutan, and then sometimes government supports 60% for the certifier, and then the 40% is being borne by the local farmers or the producers or the businessmen.
If most farmers aren't worrying about export markets, why would they worry about getting certified? What's the motivation for them to certify their food? rather than just sell it locally without certification?
Yeah, if they're certified, they get slightly premium price compared to other local produce. But then again, this may not be readily taken up by the consumers. So unless they go to like capital city Thimphu or nearby towns where there are more people who can afford that, otherwise they would just rather sell it as local produce. But the benefit of certifying their produce is that they get support in terms of training and other resources and inputs from the government. And then also they feel like they are contributing towards the government's endeavor to go fully organic. So that must be the motivations for our farmers.
Do you think the government agenda to go organic is popular with farmers and with the wider public? Is it well known about?
Yes. Now, farmers, if you go to any part of the country, to a large extent, you would see, farmers, if you ask them, they know what organic agriculture is. And they tell us using synthetic agrochemicals make their soil hard, acidic, hard, and not good to work on. Our government is really promoting organic agriculture across all the 20 districts. And in all the 20 districts, we do have farmers group who are doing organic farming.
Is the country working on or exploring possible innovations for fertilizer and pesticide? Because I know that getting enough of both is maybe one of the challenges that's going on at the moment. Do you think that by 2035 there will be solutions to this?
Solutions definitely will be there, I would think, because government is collaborating with many countries as well as the universities. And we also invite experts from outside country to train our people. Just recently, there was training on permaculture in one of nearby our college. Yeah, we also organize conferences and seminars on organic agriculture. IFOAM 2012 was held in our capital city, Thimphu, so where we had all these heavyweights of organic agriculture come to Bhutan and share their experiences and how we could support each other. So government is actively exploring for partners and experts as well as the donors to further promote organic agriculture. And there are NGOs also who are actually supporting the local farmers as well as the businessmen to do organic.
Taking it slowly and not forcing farmers into anything, a lot of people would think that's a sensible strategy, especially after we've seen with Sri Lanka's very rushed attempt to implement organic agriculture that led to increased imports, a lot of farmers struggling, and probably a loss of support for the whole project now in the country. You've said some things implying that the use of chemicals might be trending in the wrong way in some contexts. Do you think there's a need for kind of intermediary targets? Would it help if there were government targets to decrease by this amount every year or some kind of goal in between now and 2035?
That was actually planned in the past, but somehow whatever went into the heads of the policymakers, that didn't really prevail or happen. But then if we really want to become fully organic by 2035, that's one of the strategies to slowly reduce the supply and then application of synthetic agrochemicals, and at the same time promote the production of all these organic manures as well as these biopesticides. Our land holdings are very small, so if we can really design the farm, the use of all these external inputs, be they organic manure or organic pesticides, biopesticides, they should not be a major challenge because we can recycle the nutrients on the farm, so make it circular and not depend so much for inputs from the external sources. So government need to really think from that. And then I would really emphasize on making a very good, robust kind of farm design, including all this, not just multiple crops, but then also the fruit trees and then few animals, cattle or chicken or duck or goats and so on. Many farmers do have at least one or two heads of animals, different kinds of animals on the farm, which generate a lot of organic manures. And so, yeah, they're to a large extent, farmers are comfortable. They are not complaining of not having anything to eat. If you ask farmers, like most farmers, they have something to eat throughout the year, even if in the dried form. So they are not suffering in a major sense. Now to switch to fully organic, anyways, we have been importing food from outside, so we may not see a major challenge.
I was speaking to a Sri Lankan academic recently about the organic farming policy in that country, and I asked him about whether he knew about the state of India, Sikkim, where they'd also tried this transition. From what I'd seen, had more success. He said that part of the reason they'd been successful was that they just import a lot of food, really, so they're not as self-sufficient. How self-sufficient is Bhutan, and do you see that trending either up or down? I know you said in 2020 that was part of the reason they had to push that deadline back, worries around food security.
In terms of vegetables, during the season, we are more or less 60 to 70% self-sufficient. In terms of egg, I think at one point we exported eggs to the Indian state of Calcutta, or I don't remember, Northeast Indian state. Now, I think the self-sufficiency has come down slightly. And potatoes, we are quite self-sufficient. We export a lot, but then we also import big quantities of potatoes during the off-season. Fruits, we import a lot, although we produce quite a bit. And now the government has started Million Fruit Tree Project. It's the third year. Government must have supported 300 million fruit trees for a population of just less than 1 million in the country, including 50% farmers.
Are you seeing any climate impacts on water, like scarcity and issues around seasons and when things grow, anything like that? Is it affecting agriculture yet?
Yeah, we are seeing the impacts of climate change in various ways. One thing is drying up the lakes and the rivers, spring sources in almost 15 to 16 districts across the country. So water sources drying up is one visible impact that we are seeing. The other is the new pests and diseases, like I was saying, the armyworms, the blights, and so on. So that's another area where we are seeing the impact of climate change. In our place, we are supposed to have this monsoon rain, but then it has been very dry for quite some time. We are receiving a little bit of rain, but then it's not enough to even soak the lands. And we do receive heavy rain sometimes just around the time of paddy harvest, when we are supposed to have no more rain. The monsoon is supposed to end by the 3rd or 4th week of September every year. But then we do receive this freak rain and very heavy rain when it's about to harvest our paddy sometime in November, late October, and so on. So we have been receiving that kind of freak weather situation.
Thinking to the international community, what lessons do you think can be learned for other countries? And separately, what could other countries be giving to Bhutan to make this transition?
We have to focus more on improving the farm designs. So if we can get good examples, the successful stories from outside the country in terms of designing a very good organic farm. Second is on how to also improve these pest and disease management systems, because ours is very limited, so it's not really widely accepted and then practiced. So we need to really look at the good examples on managing pests and diseases on the farms, organic farm, and how the farmers groups and cooperatives actually work, because some of our farmers groups, organic farmers groups, are not doing as well as we expect them, despite a lot of expectations from farmers groups. No, I would like to invite all of you to first come and see how it is being practiced and what suggestions you can make to further improve so that we can become fully organic by 2035, if not a little bit earlier or a little bit later, but then not in the 2050s or 2040s, but then around 2025. So then it will not only be good for Bhutan, but for the other countries too, so that there will be something to look forward to as a model. We can be a model for others to get inspired. Then once we are comfortable, then we would be more than happy to support, because at the moment we cannot support in many ways, despite our own intention to support because of limited resources and capacity.
My thanks to Dr. Tashi for coming on the show, and to Vaska Kostovsky for our audio engineering. As always, there's further reading in the podcast blurb, and more articles and podcasts on this topic and similar ones on our site at www.landclimate.org. Please do leave us a review and follow us on your favourite podcast platform. And if there's a topic you want to hear more about or a guest you'd like us to feature, you can always email us at editors@landclimate.org. We'll be back in 2 weeks, so until then, thanks for listening.